Okay, so we will be concluding tonight's festivities with the Sheriff's Forum, and we have Tommy Mills, Walt McNeil, Charlie Strickland, and Mike Wood participating tonight, and we'll be using the same format, 2 minutes, and I've got a healthy stack of questions here. So, Mr. Mills, we will start with you, and this will be for all of you, and we might skip around a little bit because we've got so many, but a nice straightforward one to get you started. What is your background in law enforcement, and how does that qualify you for this position? Mr. Mills.
Thank you. It's good to be here this evening, and thanks to the Women League of Voters for having this opportunity to speak to you. 34 years of law enforcement. I started out as a young man volunteering in my community, and I joined or they accepted me, the Florida Highway Patrol, as an auxiliary trooper, and I was there for several years. I spent 24 years with the Leon County Sheriff's Office before I retired as a captain, and I spent the last 8 years in Gaston County, where I served as a major in charge of criminal investigations, internal affairs, and judicial services. I'm prepared to be the next sheriff of Leon County because I know about running not only the law enforcement component. I'm certified on the law enforcement side and the correction side. I know about running a bad community. 8 years ago, I came to you as a citizen, and I said, we're going in the wrong direction. We need change. We need new leadership. And the people spoke. They decided to stay the same. In 2012, I ran again, and they pitted experience against change. We still need that change. We need change to make sure that Leon County is my home. I want my home safe. Just like you, I believe that you want your family safe. I believe that you want your property safe when you come back home at the end of the day, and someone to protect your constitutional values. That's what I stand for. I believe that we got to get back, and where we're losing our fight against crime is in our consumer service component, where we have a sheriff that you don't know. You have officers that are down in the streets that does not engage the community. How are you going to get feedback? How are you going to make sure that the family's safe? One fix won't fix everything. What will fix one side of the community won't fix the other side. We've got to get back down in the community. I believe in the Andy Griffin approach. Thank you.
Mr. McNeil.
Thank you, Skip, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having the forum, and thank all of you for sitting through 4 discussions on this evening. You know, I've been a police officer working in law enforcement my entire adult life. I started with the Tallahassee Police Department in 1977 and moved through the ranks of the Tallahassee Police Department to the position of police chief from 1997 until 2007. We did such a great job when I was chief in Tallahassee that then Governor Charlie Crist looked at what we were doing with juvenile crime and said, look, we need to do what you're doing statewide. And he asked me to come and take over the Department of Juvenile Justice. We did a great job with that, and we put a plan together that became quite honestly, the roadmap that they continue to use in the Department of Juvenile Justice today. He also then asked if I could go and do the same thing with the Department of Corrections. And we went there and we put together what I call another blueprint, and that focused on recidivism, and we drove recidivism down in our state, looking at reentry efforts. And I'm running for sheriff of Leon County because obviously my experience, my background, we had some of the lowest crime rates in the state of Florida when I was your police chief. We did it then, we can do it again. I understand the need to have a comprehensive approach to the crime problem we have in our community. It's going to take us working and looking at those pockets of crime, as some have described it, and coming up with solutions and plans to resolve the issues, and working cooperatively across the law enforcement spectrum, that is with Leon County Sheriff's Office, Tallahassee Police Department, and all the agencies here that make up Leon County.
Thank you. Mr. Strickland?
Well, first, let me say that I'm very happy to be here. Didn't always enjoy speaking to large groups of people. 25 years of law enforcement has taught me how to deal with a lot of situations. But I've got to tell you, I'm having the best time of my life right now. This is the most fun I've had in my adult life. I look forward to these debates. it's not often you get to poke at your former bosses and challenge them on things and do so in a public forum. I'm originally from Jackson County. I grew up on a peanut farm. My grandfather used to throw a 50-pound sack of corn on my back, cut a hole in it, and send me running through a hog pen. Did not make me a very good athlete, but it was challenging. I grew up with a work ethic. It's a little different than some. I worked from what we called in Jackson County from can to can't. So you worked until you ran out of light. And then I learned how to put lights on the tractor. And that is a work ethic that I've had my entire career. When I came to law enforcement here, working on my bachelor's degree, working at FSU Police, stayed there for a little while, moved on to the sheriff's office after I got my bachelor's degree, got a master's degree in business from FSU School of Business. I ran the violent crime section as a lieutenant, the SWAT team as a team leader, the motor unit as a sergeant, the financial crimes unit as a sergeant, patrol field training as a sergeant, the training unit as a sergeant. Spent a lot of time as a sergeant if you didn't pick up on that. Never worked my way to the top, but we're not done yet. And see, that's the key. There's so much more to do. I look back after 25 years and I said, what more could I have done? What more could I have done? I got a degree. I started a business, Talon Range, Talon Training Group over in Midway. I've trained 6,000 people through my company to protect themselves. I give free speeches all the time, as you can tell. This is free too. I'm excited about the opportunity to have as a leader in this community, a law enforcement leader and a trainer, to take us forward where we need to be as a law enforcement agency.
Thank you. Sheriff Wood?
Well, thank you to the League for having us, and this is absolutely a privilege. It's a privilege to be a sheriff, and it's a privilege to be here to address you. Charlie, if this is your idea of fun, brother, I promise you I didn't know you as well as I thought I did. But with that said, so my background is I started with the Leon County Sheriff's Office as a volunteer in 1982. About a year later, a little less, I got hired as a deputy sheriff, and I've been with the Sheriff's Office ever since. I've had the privilege to serve just about every unit the Sheriff's Office has. I've been a patrol deputy. I've been a school resource deputy. I've been a sergeant in both property crimes and violent crimes. Made the rank of lieutenant, worked my way through patrol, vice narcotics. Made captain. I was a commander of the Criminal Investigations Bureau, which encompassed every investigative arm the Sheriff's Office has. I was promoted in 2006 to the rank of major, and I was the law enforcement division director. So I have some experience in that regard as a top-level administrator, because at that rank, we were the second only to the sheriff, the way Sheriff Campbell had the organization structured. So I spent 10 years. One of the privileges I had was one of Sheriff Campbell's nuances is he would tell you where he wanted you to go as opposed to asking you where you wanted to go. So he gave me the privilege to go to the Leon County Jail in 2009, and I spent 3.5 years at the Leon County Jail. It was one of the most enlightening experiences in my career. Made a ton of innovative changes at the jail. Late in my career, I moved back over to the main office to assume the role as law enforcement director due to some retirements. And ultimately, in retirement, my plan, and everybody has, this is fairly public, I was coming back with Sheriff Campbell, and when he passed away, there was a process with Governor Scott, and I was appointed sheriff to just finish this term out. So I just feel like I have a wealth of experience, including having been the sheriff for a 1.5 years, that prepares me for this opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. Are any of our election supervisors candidates still here? Well, no offense, but the questions are pouring in for this race. We didn't exactly have too many from the audience on that race. So I've got 2 or 3 here that are talking about, and this will be for you, Mr. McNeil, reentry services from the county jail. There's also some questions about incarcerated people coming back. But the question is, how do we improve the jail's reentry services so these people presumably don't end up being a repeat customer?
Yeah, that is one of our major problems in terms of trying to make sure we lower the crime rate in our community. One of the things we've got to do is we've got to go in and do an evaluation of the inmates we have in our system. One of the things I plan to do is, and if you didn't know this, that about 33%, 24 to 33% of the persons in our jails suffer from mental health issues. We've got to make sure that those persons who are in our jail that have mental health issues, that we are working collaboratively with our county commissioners, with our health department here in our community to make sure that we get resources into our community that will get those persons and divert them from our jail system. Also, we've got to make sure, I'm already working with the Ready for Work here in Leon County, working with Reverend Holmes. One of the things I created when I was the Secretary of Department of Corrections was a reentry prison right here in our community, in Gaston County is where it's located. We've got to make sure that we have a reentry program in our jail system that focuses on who these persons are, what kind of resources are available, and connect those persons with those resources and bring some of those resources into our jail so that we can start working with those persons so that they don't come back into our prison system. That means we've got to have a holistic approach to the problems, not merely focused on arresting people, but focusing on doing what we do in terms of certification, that is classification rather, classifying and seeing exactly what these needs are these persons have, and then matching those needs with the resources we have out in our community.
Thank you. Mr. Strickland?
Why did I know you were going to go to me next? This is a difficult question that has presents a unique challenge to us. First off, I spent most of my career as a cop trying to put people into the correction system, the ones that needed to go there. It really didn't concern me as much about what happened once they got there because it was so difficult to make cases, prosecutable cases, and do these things. And then something happened to me. My father went to prison. Okay. As an adult, I had to make a difficult decision, and that was to return home to my hometown of Mariana, buy the farm, go to the bank, beg and borrow money to keep our family farm back on its feet so that when my dad got out a year later, my dad's a combat wounded Vietnam veteran, 3 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star. He's a hero. He's my hero, but he made a mistake. And when he did his time and he came out, I gave him the farm back. I didn't give him the land back because I bought that. But I gave him this situation back. Not everybody that goes to prison, everybody who goes to jail has that type of support mechanism. It's important for us to work with people's families, to work with people who are incarcerated, to make sure that they have an environment to return to. You know who suffers the most from somebody going to jail? Their family, their child, their spouse. They've lost an income, whether it was lawful income or not, they lost an income. They lost guidance from a parent, good parent or not, I don't know. But the fact is they suffer too. So we have to work with the community and with people that are in our jail to work together to make sure that these people don't want to go back. But if they, while they're in there, that they know that their family loves them, that they've got proper visitation. Maybe they get to see their kids. There's a way to do this. Okay, so I don't have to know, and I understand a lot about the jail, don't get me wrong. But I understand the emotions, and we have to tap into that so that we can make a difference, so that when people come out, they have jobs and an opportunity to raise a family.
Mr. Wood?
Well, certainly recidivism is huge, and I couldn't agree more that when an inmate leaves the jail, if they don't have a way to sustain their family, they're going to do what they know. And I acknowledge that. I can tell you our jail runs a multitude of programs inside the jail. Everything from how to job interview, how to dress for an interview. We run a GED program, an AA program. There's a multitude of programs inside the jail. One of our, sort of the pride of our programs is funded by the Public Safety Coordinating Council through the County Commission, and it's called the LIFT program, which is Leveraging Interventions for Transformations, where we put inmates through a 6-month program. And ultimately, they learn to do Word documents, Excel, PowerPoint, and they work to a graduation process where they do a presentation at graduations. I had county commissioners at one of our last graduations that said every commissioner should attend that graduation because of the value. One of the things that we talked about, and I brought this up when we had a forum at the Downtown Business Association, is the opportunity to hire those folks when they leave the jail is incumbent upon our community. This is a community-wide problem because the problem when they go back into the community is the communities. So I challenge business owners to look at nonviolent offenders who have been released from jail, see what their background is, take a chance. You have to take a chance on these folks because once they've been arrested and developed a criminal past, they're going to have that past associated with them going forward. 22% of the inmates in the Leon County Jail are sentenced. That's 22% of a little over 1,000. So we have a huge population in jail that are pre-sentence detainees. They could be going to the Department of Corrections or they could be getting a plea deal next week. So it's hard to gauge and train everybody in our jail because only 22% of the inmates in our jail have a defined departure date, if that makes sense. and I'm out of time.
Mr. Mills.
Yes, sir. Recidivism is extremely important. But you got to remember that the individual that comes to jail or goes to prison, if they're in there for a while, whatever their habit is, we've cleaned them up. They do very well. They say, look, I'm getting out, I'm never coming back. But recidivism, we've got to work on it on the outside. Because if you turn someone back loose into a community, say they spent 5 years in prison, and when they get back out and the community have gotten worse, let me tell you, they're headed straight back. We've got to, and I told you earlier, where we're losing the battle with crime is really in consumer services. While we're doing our job every day out on the street, making contact with you, we're also making contact with that individual that's standing on the corner. We're also making contact with that person that I wouldn't know by driving by because I've been in the business so long. I know Tommy Mills, he'd been in jail X amount of times. I pull over, talk to him, and engage him in conversation. What's going on? Why are you standing on the corner? How can I help you? What can we do? Let me tell you, people, this is not a program. We got to work this thing out. And if we get out on the streets and we work it out like we should, guess what? We're going to be better for it. Recidivism, we got to make sure that our community is cleaned up, that it's as crime-free as it can possibly be. Then we can help people get on track and do those things we need to. Not only that, but when you clean your community up, you also save taxpayer dollars. You also make the community better as a whole. And everybody, because they've been in jail, they're not seeking a crime of violence. But let me tell you this, when we send people to jail for a long, extended period of time on drug charges, they'll go to prison and they'll say, look, if you're going to treat me like a criminal, I might as well be one. We got to do better on what we're doing and how we're doing it. Our criminal justice system is broken. People, we got to fix it. We got to fix it from the bottom up, and we need someone who can get out there on these streets and clean them up and make a difference in our community.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. We start with Mr. Strickland. What is your assessment of the state of cooperation between the various law enforcement agencies in Leon County? And assuming you think it's something less than perfect, what would you do to improve it?
After 22 years with the Leon County Sheriff's Office and several with FSU PD, I thought I knew the answer to that question. I thought everything was great until I left. And I don't know how many people know this, on Talon shooting range. And I was out at the counter one day and an FDLE agent came in and said, what are you going to do to fix the problem the sheriff's office has with all of the other law enforcement agencies? And I said, what do you mean? And he says, you know, you're viewed as a hurdle. Everything that we want to do in Leon County has to be cleared through the sheriff's office. And it's like you just want to get in the way. And I said, that's not true. And I talked to a few other people in law enforcement, and they had no reason to lie to me anymore because I wasn't working there. And they knew I wanted to make changes. I don't think it's intentional. I think it's about being a constitutional sheriff and trying to make sure that people in the county are treated right. But we have to make sure we don't go too far with that. The sheriff's job is to protect people's constitutional rights, all of them. But at the same time, we have to start reaching out. Look at our memorandum of understanding with the city. And while it's functional, it's not encouraged. Going to check-ons at TPD, forming more task forces. I was a product of the robbery task force days where we had 2 detectives from the sheriff's office, 2 police officers from the investigators from the police department. We were working cases and it was working well. But for political reasons and management issues, it was too cumbersome and it was done away with. And I'd like to see those days come back. We need to see the agency start working together closer. And that's going to take leadership, a new direction, leadership actually reaching out, reaching across the aisle, shaking the hands of these officers. No more blue and green. I mean, granted, there are different philosophies and different directions to share. The police department's more like a corporation. We're more like a small family business. The fact is we're in the same business. We need to be working closer together. It's going to take us reaching out to them, bringing them into the fold, and doing more together.
Sheriff Wood.
Well, I take issue with that. First of all, I don't govern what FDLE does in Leon County, as they have jurisdiction to do whatever they choose to do without my oversight or permission. So I don't impact what FDLE does. But what I will tell you is from the commissioner to the deputy commissioner, both deputy commissioners and the regional supervising agent, I have a great relationship. I also participate in the regional domestic security task force with those folks. So We talk all the time. I enlist their assistance on many occasions because you may not know, but Florida Department of Law Enforcement offers the DNA and serology lab that the Sheriff's Office uses exclusively because we don't have those services. Our relationship with TPD, I would just challenge you, I'm not sure it's ever been in a better place. There's no contention between Chief DeLeo and I. Chief Forseth is a longtime friend. We grew up in the business. The majority of the command staff at TPD are folks that I grew up in the business with. I'm just very comfortable talking with them. I would cite an email that one of my subordinates received the other day from Sergeant Kramer, who I've known him since he got into business. He's a patrol officer at TPD. He identified a crime scene he went to that was fairly bloody, involved several victims, and he was busy tending to victims and had somewhat level of chaos on his hands. And when he turned around, 2 green and white cars had stopped. They were stringing up crime scene tape, creating crime scene entry logs, and he just complimented us on how it's not blue and green anymore, it's us. We're all on the same radio channels with the CDA, so the Sheriff's Office hears what the police department does and vice versa. And we absolutely encourage help. I would tell you that our mutual aid agreement is very serviceable, and it allows for a TPD officer or a sheriff's officer, whoever's closest unit, to be dispatched to an emergency call, including if a TPD officer is coming into town from any corner of our county where they have no jurisdiction, which is not my decision, but they have the latitude to address emergency crimes and deal with them, and we're all structured and encouraging because it's not for us, it's for the citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Mills?
One of my goals is to create an atmosphere of cooperation, collaboration, and unity. Because as has been said on this panel, we are fighting the same thing. That is for you as the citizens are safe, that our homes are safe, that our constitutional values are defended. We can't talk about it any longer. We got to do something about it. We've been talking about it far too long. I've had the great pleasure of, especially as being as the jail watch commander, is I had to know all of the policies and procedures of every agency that came in there, and I worked closely with them. Even when they didn't know what it is they was turning into me, I had to know what it is that they was supposed to turn, because the law says, or the state statute says, that I had to ensure that the probable cause fit the charge and that it was a complete probable cause. So even when they didn't understand, because sometimes you have agencies that report to you that don't come that often. So they hadn't done an arrest in a year sometimes. Sometimes they hadn't done an arrest in a month or 2 months, and the system has changed or the law have changed. So it was my responsibility to know the law and to impart upon them, but also to encourage them, that they had a great relationship when they came to work with me. And that's where we got to go back to. We got to ensure that we have created that environment, reaching across the board. And I had the great pleasure of doing, the sheriff gave me the great pleasure of doing the work camp while I was at the jail. While the top was struggling and had differences, I started a program, I had no money. I had to go to the city, and I engaged them, and all the equipment that we needed, we got it. While the chief and the sheriff was scrapping or fighting or had their differences, guess what? I got all the resources I need to start the program and had no money. We can work together. We will work together. We must work together.
Okay, Mr. McNeil?
The fundamental problem in our community right now is we have the highest crime rate of any county in the state of Florida. We're the 14th most violent community in America, according to some of the reports that we've seen. That speaks to whether we're cooperating well or not, there's something wrong. And what's wrong is that we're not utilizing our resources as effectively as we otherwise could in terms of making sure that deputies and police officers are in the right place at the right time. I had a conversation with Chief DeLeo just a couple of weeks ago, talking about his resources and the lack of ability to place his resources in the right place. When you start looking at the problem of crime in our community, it's a great deal about how we work cooperatively, not how we communicate, how much we talk, how much the sheriff talks to the chief. It's how effective are we in terms of making sure the resources are placed at the right place at the right time. When I hear deputies saying or asking for an ink pad to work a crime scene and calls and says, I'm out of an ink pad, and a TPD officer says, I can bring that ink pad to you, and then he's denied going to take that ink pad, and they say, no, we'll send a deputy from across the county to bring you a simple ink pad. That's a lack of resources being used in the appropriate way. And there are countless examples of the same thing taking place in our community. We've got to get back to making sure that we're utilizing our resources. We have, and talking to police officers and deputies, they will tell you, just as Charlie Strickland said, that we have a problem. That problem is affecting the safety of our community. And until we start to own up to that and realize that that's affecting our safety in our community, we're going to continue to have these problems. And I can tell you, when I'm sheriff, that's one of the first things we're going to deal with, this lack of cooperation and working cooperatively across geographic boundaries.
Thank you. We will now move on to our next question. We're going to do one more for all four of you. That will give all four of you a start. And then, since I've got so many here, we're going to just do some one by one after that. So this is for you, Sheriff Wood. There's obviously a huge debate going on about gun safety and gun control measures, and a lot of the hot button terms are things like gun shows and high capacity magazines and background checks. What do you advocate for in this space? What would you do what is your perfect state when it comes to gun safety measures?
Well, I'm an advocate of the Second Amendment, and I'm an advocate of concealed carry when you go through the proper process, complete all the channels and the background checks, and carry according to the statute. I certainly feel like that the debate that I faced most recently with the legislative session was the open carry and carry on campus. And it's a very hot topic, and I understand that. I'm not about limiting people's Second Amendment rights to bear arms, to possess firearms. You know, logistically, as it relates to high-capacity magazines and rifles, I'm not a gunsmith, I'm not an armorer, but I have been experiencing weapons over my career, and I understand that some of that's just a facade. You can do equal carnage with a 12-gauge shotgun that you can other rifles, certainly not with pinpoint accuracy. But as it relates to our ability to carry firearms as a community, I'm an advocate of concealed carry as we have it. I do not think we should do open carry. My purpose for that, or my concern for that, is simply this. As a law enforcement officer, and I see this through the eyes of a law enforcement officer, anytime we encounter a suspect or individuals or a group of individuals and someone is wearing a gun, that gun is going to have my attention until I've satisfied myself that that is not a problem. So therefore, I would hate to see a law-abiding citizen carrying a gun openly to be a diversion to a deputy or a police officer that would cause them to be focused on the wrong thing and get hurt by something inadvertently. I'm not for carrying guns on college campuses. I've stood my ground on that. I have acknowledged that I feel like there is some potential research there, as some public universities across the United States have started to allow for carry on campuses for concealed carry permit holders who are 21 years or older. So I'm not wishy-washy on that. I was totally against it, but I'm open to looking at the research going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Mills?
I support the Second Amendment. Also, for carry and conceal firearms, go through the proper channels. I do not advocate carrying on campuses. But when guns and weapons become the topic of the day, I show you a people who don't feel safe. I believe in gun control, but I believe in gun control the old-fashioned way. Do your job, make people feel safe, they'll control their guns. That's where we got to get back to. When we're buying weapons for ourselves, weapons for our wives, and weapons for our children, and sometimes our wives don't even want to carry them, that's a problem within itself. It means that we fail. And as someone said here, we've got to own up that we're failing. But then we've got to own up that we need to do something about it. I must abide by the law. If the law says you can have it, then I can't come and take it, and I wouldn't dare try and take it. But at the end of the day, it's about making you feel safe, making our kids feel safe. Too many incidents where kids are taking guns to school. Something's wrong with that picture. We fail so that our children, and then someone mentioned about people that have mental illness. I've never seen a time where the mental ill, when I was growing up, the mental ill always felt safe. People, we've got a problem. And we've got to get back to making sure that every citizen feels safe. Programs are not going to do it. It's going to be through consumer services. That means I'm working And we're talking, we're engaging in conversation. Am I getting feedback from you on a daily basis? How am I doing? How am I serving you? Are you feeling safe? Are your kids feeling safe? I want to be the kind of sheriff that where one day your child, your grandchild, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Mr. McNeil.
We all watched in horror as the police officers were gunned down in Dallas. We also watched as those protesters who were protesting legally were being escorted by police officers. But one thing that we did notice, and perhaps you noticed, was that many of those persons in Texas have an open carry, and they were carrying rifles, at least rifles. And when the shooting started, law enforcement people had to sort out who's who. I certainly support the Second Amendment, but in terms of assault weapons, we've got to get control of assault weapons in our nation. And there is no reason why we should have assault weapons on the streets of this country, military-type weapons that everybody has access to and can do the kind of carnage that we've seen time and time again in our country. We have to do something about that. As it relates to campus carry, I'm against campus carry. Now, I, like Mike Wood, looked at the issue of campus carry, and I looked at it in terms of, and I did research on it, in terms of how it impacts our officers. And it's a deadly mix, in my opinion. Also, in terms of open carry, had the same kind of research. I wanted to make sure before I start to answer these questions that I talk to experts about this in terms of open carry and the impact it has. In the example I just gave you in terms of Dallas, open carry also has and is fraught with problems for law enforcement, and we've got to address those issues. We want to make sure our nation is safe, that our community is safe, that our county is safe, but we have to make sure that we're looking at these issues not from a prism, but from a realistic perspective. And for those reasons, that's my position on weapons.
Thank you. Mr. Strickland.
Some of you are not going to like my answer, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I train responsible citizens to carry firearms concealed in this community. My company has trained over 6,000 people in this community to carry concealed. Florida has the highest number of concealed carry permit holders that it ever has. It's over 1.5 million now. Don't know the exact number. It's a big number. The number's growing. Why? Because people are afraid. When we eliminate the reason for you to be afraid, well, then people will quit wanting to carry a gun. A lot of us carry a gun everywhere we go. I do, because I am one of the people that I consider to be a protector of our society. I'm trained. I train others to do the same thing. I train responsible people, and there are a lot of them out there. You come through a metal detector, you might not be armed, but a lot of us are. We're here to protect you when somebody comes through that door. If you think you're going to get assault weapons off the streets of the United States, you're probably going to have a hard time doing that. That law didn't work during the Clinton gun ban. Crime went up. It went down after it went away. I don't know why. All I know is that, like the sheriff said, I can take a 12-gauge shotgun and do just as much damage as I can with one of these other types of weapons. All right? They're cosmetic, and they're scary looking to certain people. But the fact is it's not the guns that are going around doing this. It's people have easy access. So let's talk about how to keep them out of certain people's hands. Let's do that. But what about you? Should you not have access to a firearm to protect yourself? Should you not be trained to protect yourself? Because I can promise you this. I want to be your sheriff. And the legislature doesn't care what I say. In my feelings, the legislature is going to pass what laws they want to pass. The fact is that I'm not going to be there for you at 2 o'clock in the morning when somebody kicks in the door to your house. You're going to have to protect yourself. So you might figure out a way to do that. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right, so we're going to do some little one-offs here. If you want to respond to somebody else's answer, I'm going to give you 1 chip to play on that. Okay, you get a 30-second answer, so use it wisely.
Can you use half of it?
And we'll what?
Can you use half of it?
No. You can't split it up. 1 chip. All right, so we'll start with you, Mr. Mills. This is a question about this is a audience question about the recent cases of police brutality. What needs to be done to reform the criminal justice system to reduce the cases where police act inappropriately?
Anytime law enforcement act inappropriately, it's unthinkable. We have some of the best training that's happening today that's ever been happening. But what I see is that the training from senior officers training our young officers, I think we're just turning them loose too soon. And even when we turn them loose, I believe that the senior officer should stay in the field. And that's what I'm saying about our consumer service. Is that we need to be out there to ensure that our officers not only are doing their job, but have the best training and seeing it through seasoned officers' eyes how not to make mistakes. And if we do that, and I think we're going to be better for it. Do we need to go back in the classroom and do more training? As Charlie said, I think we're getting some of the best training. What we have to do is, especially with some of the smaller agencies, is make sure that they're not skipping that training and making sure they're getting that yearly training that they get. We used to do it twice a year, but with the budgets and economics, we cut back to once a year. I believe we need to increase that back to twice a year. But I still believe that we need to have senior officers more on the street, more leading and guiding our young officers, making sure that they're safe also. How to protect our citizens and how to remain safe themselves.
Okay. Anybody want to cash a chip in there?
I'll do it.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm a certified firearms instructor, a general subjects instructor with a CJSTC, driving instructor, and a defensive tactics instructor. I'm letting those lapse because I'm retired. And if I make sheriff, I'm probably not going to roll around on the mat with anybody because my body's starting to fall apart in my old age. I'm still younger than anybody up here, but still. That being said, we need to train our law enforcement officers better than we ever have, but we need to quit worrying about teaching. We need to learn how to shoot, fight, drive. We've got to learn how and teach our officers how to talk to people. Have you seen the newest generation? This is their means of communication, not this. So we've got to change the way we teach. As an instructor and a person who's been teaching law enforcement for a very long time, 20 years.
It's a 30-second chip.
I get it. Well, then I'll just stop right there.
Okay. All right. Mr. McNeil, this is a league question from the league. There's discussion about the militarization of police. Do you think that has gone too far with some of these armored vehicles and such? Do you think, what is your view on the militarization of our police?
Well, there are some issues that go hand in hand with the militarization of the police. If we're going to say that every citizen has the access to an assault weapon, the military-type weapons, what do you think police officers have to do? One of the things we say in law enforcement is if we get a suspect who has a knife, we need to bring a gun. If you got a gun, we need to bring something bigger. So this is an escalating kind of scenario we have with respect to our citizens being armed as efficiently as we are being armed. Now, I don't necessarily support those issues in terms of how we are militarizing in some cases, but here's the reality, folks. After 9/11 occurred in our nation, every police department in the country was asked to take on, as one of our first levels of defense, is police officers on the street in terms of being that component that deals with terrorism. If we've got terrorists out there who are, as we've seen this, we're talking about ISIS and all of this, law enforcement has to be able to meet that kind of force with force. And so there's going to be some level of, if you will, militarizing of police so that we do have those armored vehicles and we have assault weapons so that we can respond and protect our citizens.
Okay, 30-second rebuttal. These are non-transferable, non-negotiable, can't be carried over to the, next debate, anything like that. Okay.
Get one each time? Or
No,
just one
no, you get one.
Done.
One and only one. Okay, sounds like it's not going to be used. Next is for you, Mr. Strickland. What is your position on the use of police body cameras, and would you release videos to the public in the event of a charge against an officer?
Okay, first off, I'm going to use my time wisely. I bet you the families of the police officers in Dallas were glad they had armored vehicles and bunkers and everything else to respond to that. So when the public quits threatening to kill law enforcement, we'll quit arming ourselves the way we have to. We need body armor. We need that protection. Moving on to body cameras. A year and a half ago, I started talking about body cameras. July 7th, a year ago, I was rolling around sort of struggling with a guy had a stolen gun, armed robbery suspect from another state, hood of my car. See, I was working the road just a year ago as a midnight shift watch commander, and I connect with the citizens and with the officers on the streets. And when that happened, when it was all said and done, I went back and spoke to my subordinates, and I said, boy, I wish I'd have had a camera. Because I was afraid in the middle of that fight that what I was doing wasn't going to be accurately represented because it was me and him and his friend. Well, I was outnumbered. The stories were outnumbered. It wasn't going to probably work out in my favor, although I'm a subject matter expert in use of force and I can explain it. Body cameras need to be implemented. They're going to be implemented. I've been talking about it. I was the only one talking about it 2 or 3 months ago in these forums. It's happening. It needs to be leveraged. We need to release the video as soon as we can legally do so to make sure that we're not sitting around questioning what happened. We need to hold ourselves accountable. We're better trained. We're better prepared. We're more professional and use less violence than we ever have in law enforcement today. As an instructor, I can tell you that's the case. But because of this and social media, you see every mistake we seem to make nowadays. And so it seems like we're worse than we've ever been. A body camera will help me and my guys, my girls, my ladies, gentlemen, whatever the politically correct term for that is nowadays, prove to you that we are doing a good job. We'll do that. But the policies are easy to write. We just need to work with the community. We need to work with the city to make sure we're doing the right things. And so I'm very much in favor of body cameras.
Okay, anybody want to react to that? Okay. Finally, Sheriff Wood, this is an audience question. How will these newly placed SRO, standing room only officers, no, school resource officers in elementary schools, it is standing room always for them, I bet. How will they be utilized during the school day? And what will their jobs be? Beyond just keeping kids safe? What will be their duties?
Well, that was the primary focus when Superintendent Pons approached me about doing it, because the bottom line is, you know, we have a school resource deputy in every high school, in every middle school, and then they split time with 4 Title I elementary schools. So I didn't feel like it was fiscally prudent to pursue full-time school resource deputies to be in the schools. I think that's too big of an ask. We have other needs in our organization that trump that. Superintendent Pons was asking simply for the sake of security. My position on school resource deputies is they're kind of a two-edged sword. As having been a school resource deputy, their primary goal, the purpose for the school resource program, is not security in and of itself. It's to develop relationships, teach classes, talk to children about bullying, talk to children who are being bullied, promote not drinking and driving, not texting and driving, but by and large creating a relationship with a person dressed like this, with a young person in the community, so that they can identify that deputy with, in fact, just another person like their mom, dad, uncle, or aunt. With that said, Superintendent Pons is funding the school resource deputies in the elementary schools. So I've offered to take deputies, and I've had deputies sign up, and their off time, it's almost like it's like an off-duty detail. So we're going to try to do as much coverage of the elementary schools as we can. We're going to put on a very brief training for them, understanding that school resource deputies function a little differently than on the street. I want them to be officer friendly. I want them to engage with the elementary kids. But in all fairness, Superintendent Pons who approached me with this idea, which I support, by the way, his goal was really school security. And so the fact that we have deputies in the school does offer some level of security and perhaps prevention, but that is not their purpose for being in the school in and of itself.
Okay. Any responses, or we'll move on?
Yeah, let me.
Okay.
The idea of school resource officers, great idea. The problem I have is simply a small amount of training. There should be a significant amount of training that goes into a school resource officer going to one of our schools relative to all the nuances related to teaching and interacting with our kids, also having a responsibility of security as well. This isn't something we should take very lightly and simply say we can put deputies in the school on a part-time basis on a secondary employment kind of situation. This is something that's critical. This is really serious, and we've seen time and time again in other communities across the nation where police officers in schools and deputies in school have had issues in terms of interacting with our youth. We need to really think about this and plan it. One of the things I see here is we don't do enough planning. We simply react. And what we should do before we put the students, the resource officers in the school is sit down and plan exactly how we're going to do this.
Okay.
I have 30 seconds.
Okay, 30, yeah. He can't have a minute left. You only have 30 seconds to start with. You didn't use yours. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Okay. You didn't use yours, Sheriff Wood. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Your 30 seconds. Did you use your chip?
No, I did not, actually.
Saved your chip for your own question just in case somebody used their chip. It was,
You're killing me. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold my chip.
okay, that's fine. Well, the chips are done, so too bad. Okay, so we're going to go real quick. I got 4 more questions here. We got a couple minutes left. Give me a real tight 30-second answer on one question each, and then we'll close with one question that you'll all answer, okay? So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Mills. Would you allocate resources for community outreach programs, and what forms might those take?
Sure, I would, because that's important. And even though when we have those, there are times when incidents are occurring, or that there are community outreach programs that have come up slack. But if it's got to deal with the safety of our children, then, you know, we've got to do it. If it's got to deal with public safety in general at all, that's a no-brainer. We got to do it because that's what we are here for, is to ensure that the citizens of Leon County are safe at all times.
Okay. Mr. McNeil, what will you do to enforce the recent reforms involving processing forensic exams for sexual assault cases?
Well, first of all, we have to make sure that we actually carry out and examine them and make sure we get them to FDLE in a timely fashion. I mean, that just simply means making sure that we've got the training that's necessary for the deputies and our ID section to make sure that when those come in, that we do it in a timely fashion and get them to FDLE. I'm not sure exactly what the premise of the question was, but simply taking care of it, make sure we get it done.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Strickland, do you support, there was some discussion in the city commissioner forums about this cure violence model. Of course, that's a city initiative, but a audience member wants to know, what are your views on that model? Do you think it's an effective one?
I believe it's an absolutely effective model. We had people go to the streets of Chicago and look at a program. They came here, they brought a professor back, they looked at a model that could be implemented here in Tallahassee. It was a $69 million impact on our community in 2014 due to violent crimes. This is going to cost half $500,000 on the south side, $500,000 on the north side. They hire interrupters that go into the neighborhoods and they actually talk to people and teach them to de-escalate, not to counter violence with violence, and it makes between a 20 and 70% reduction in crime. It pays for itself. It's a great idea. As a sheriff, I would go back and ask them to readdress this program or one very similar to it.
Okay, and finally, Sheriff Wood, there's a question about the newly expanded mental health court and directing persons with mental health problems from the jail. How would you effectively partner with this new mental health court?
Well, we partner with the courts on a routine basis, and so the mental health court is just a new addition. One of the things we've done historically with our mental health patients is we work with the Public Defender's Office very closely, our classification sections, and we coordinate with the Public Defender's Office to try to get inmates who are sentenced placed. A little known fact that I discovered as a result of being the jail director was a person could be sentenced to X number of time in the jail to be followed up by a program that involves substance abuse or perhaps mental health. If there's not a bed available for the program, the person remains in jail until they get to the program, which I find is a huge injustice, and it doesn't serve the inmate. It doesn't serve the community. So I'm an absolute fan. I would partner with it. We have classification folks that works with the public defenders, the state attorneys, and certainly with the mental health court now, we'll be a partner.
Okay. Last question. This will be for all 4 of you. We'll start with you, Mr. Mills. It began and ended with Mr. Mills. There is obviously a national discussion. There is Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, Moderators' Lives Matter. How would you build trust between law enforcement and citizens. I'm not this isn't a question about necessarily fighting crime as much as it is building trust between those two communities.
From a law enforcement standpoint, we do an outstanding job, but citizens sometimes don't know what it is we do. I said to you earlier, we lose the battle in crime because of consumer services. We're doing the job, but you don't know what it is we're doing. We don't contact you, and we shouldn't do it via memo. We should do it via doing the job on a daily basis. Making contact with you, these are the initiatives that we have. Yeah, you can send them out email. You can do all of this publication, but we need to do it in person because that is what builds trust. And how do you trust me and I trust you and you know who I am and I know who you are if I don't have that contact? Strickland pointed out we live in a time now where it's all about these devices here. We done forgot how to talk. I was at a restaurant the other day, and there was a family of 6, and I thought they were praying. I thought they were praying an awfully long time. But everybody had their phone out, and this is what we got to get back to. We got to get back to interacting with the citizens. You know me, I know you, and you know that I have your best interest in mind. How am I going to find out things that are happening in the community until after the fact? I said earlier, what we've become an institution of responding to situations when we ought to be setting the trend. We can no longer let the criminal element of the community set the trend anymore. We got to set the trend. What is the trend? That we're officer friendly, that we're there to protect you, we're there to serve you, to protect and serve above all else. They don't have a program out there that can outdo this protect and serve above all else. Officers before my time, they had it right. We've got to get it right. And it's about protecting and serving you, the citizens. You know who we are, and we know who you are. And that there's a dialogue daily. If I was going to use body cameras, you know what I want to see? Go ahead.
All right, Mr. McNeil.
The issue is one of trust, and how do we establish trust? We have to make sure that, first and foremost, that we aren't policed by strangers. One of the things that happens is that police officers, deputies, are not as familiar with the citizens that they're interacting with on a regular basis. We have to make sure that we bridge that gap and have relationships that are built one-on-one with law enforcement and citizens of our community. One of the things I hope to do is, if I'm elected your sheriff, is we will create the police law enforcement longest table. Simply doing the same thing where, and I did this in the Tallahassee Police Department, we talked about service standards, where we made sure that we met in the police department on a regular basis with every citizen that would come to our TPD and U breakfasts. And I'd sit down and our officers would sit down and talk about what the issues are face to face. One of the things you have to do as well, one of the things that we have to have transparency. We're going to make sure that every citizen understands what our policies are. Why is it that we make you kneel down when we make an arrest? Why is it that we make you lie down, and how do we handcuff you? We have to make citizens understand exactly what we're doing. You have to understand, and we will, our transparency will be, you will know what our use of force policies are, when we can use force and when we can't use force. The major issue that separates or creates this Blue Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter are issues of force that take place between law enforcement and the community. We have to make sure that citizens understand, and that whole process is transparent, that citizens are engaged in helping formulate policy. It's not merely the police chief and his staff coming up with policy, but citizens are engaged in working regularly in terms of developing policies and procedures that are then carried out by the officers. And officers engage with our citizens on a regular basis, and that's why that longest table for law enforcement is so important.
Thank you. Mr. Strickland?
A couple of programs I want to see happen pretty quick. I want to take our currently existing Sheriff's Explorer program. I want to start searching for at-risk youth that have the right mindset, that want to stand up to the bully or tell the teacher something's going on. Find those children, recruit them into our program. Then promise them this: you stay out of trouble, we'll mentor you, we'll tutor you, we'll bring you through school, we will get private donations to help you with scholarship dollars, we'll help you find part-time jobs, we will get you through 2 years of college, and then we're going to put you through the academy and put you back in your neighborhood making a difference. That'll help. Okay, another thing is I want to lobby the legislature and the school board, and I've spoken with some school board people about putting curriculum in the schools to do just what the chief was just talking about. Let's start teaching our children their rights constitutional rights, which they're not learning in school, and their responsibilities as a member of our community, and how to interact with each other and de-escalate, not fight, not resort to violence, not resort to guns. We need to teach our children that. And finally, we have a messaging issue. We've got problems in our country. And when you scream, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, all lives matter, you know what the other side of that coin hears? Black lives are the only ones that matter. Police lives are the only ones that matter. All lives matter, so I'm dismissing what you're saying. No, Black lives matter too. Police lives matter too. All our lives matter too. My life matters just as much. I want to hear your message. I need to sit down with you, and you need to tell me why you feel the way you feel, and I need to listen to you with an open heart and an open mind, and then do something about that. There's a lot of issues that divide us. We can talk about guns. We can talk all kinds of things that will divide us. But the thing that needs to bring us together is that we're members of this community, ladies and gentlemen. And we've got to start working together to make a difference, because we're not going to do it working apart.
Thank you. Sheriff Wood?
Well, I don't suggest that we have it all figured out here locally in law enforcement, but I would tell you that I'm proud of the record of the Leon County, Tallahassee community, and all the law enforcement agencies, from the University Police Departments, the Sheriff's Office, and the Police Department. We don't have some of the struggles other people have, but we have the potential for them, and it's not an accident that we're perhaps at some level not as imperiled as other communities. It's not an accident, because it's about the very things that everybody up here has spoken about. How can you debate trust? How can you debate availability? Really a classic example happened to me 2 weeks ago. One of my deputies stopped someone late at night for a headlight out, and it was a professor from FAMU. And for a host of reasons I don't have time to go into, he felt like he was being targeted as a result of his race. He reached out to me. I reached out to him. We set up a meeting. I spent 2 hours in the Capital City Cigar Club, which cost me a trip to the dry cleaners. But the bottom line is, I sat down there with about 10 men of color who are responsible, caring citizens that care what goes on in this community, care about how they're treated. And I heard what they had to say with an open heart and an open mind. And by the time we finished having our conversation, we realized that we're all really pushing in the same direction. We all want to raise our families. We want safe communities. We want access to what everybody else has access to. We want access to our law enforcement. We build these encounters. We build trust in these encounters, one encounter at a time. I don't think there's a program that we can throw blanket trust over our community. But when we do have an issue with a deputy or a police officer not responding accordingly, we deal with it. We're open to it. We're available to the community, and we're responsive to it. There will be those occasions where a deputy or a police officer takes an action and the citizen's just not satisfied, and we may find our way to agree to disagree at the end of the day, as long as we're acting within policy and within the law. But the bottom line is we have to care about our community. This community is where I was raised. I've raised my children here. Win, lose, or draw, I'm going nowhere. You're stuck with me. And so I sense that really it's about trust, one encounter at a time.
Thank you very much. And let's give a hand to all four of these candidates for sheriff.